All right, this is the third lesson on alpine skiing technique. We're covering initially fundamental concepts. This is the third one, and it's called maximizing the distribution of force application. So this is the force that you apply to the snow, and you want to maximize how you spread it out. Okay. Now the idea is, in order to prevent breaking ice bonds, and these are ice bonds between water molecules, right? The force you apply under snow must remain below the threshold of shear force. Shear force is the force which you cut these and break them. This requires that you maximize the distribution of force application in both space and time. Right? Spread it out. Now, by maximizing the distribution of force application, the skier avoids concentrations of force that exceed shear force, where bonds are broken, snow is thrown, and thus energy bled, right? Slowing you down. The concentration of force application can be measured in two ways. One is pressure, and the other is impulse. All right. Both represent a measure of concentration of force. So pressure is a measure of the concentration of force application upon a given amount of surface area, right? So pressure equals force over area, like pounds per square inch, right? Like you fill your car tire to 32 psi or whatever. Impulse is a measure of the concentration of force application within a given amount of time. So impulse is force over time, right? So it's a difference between a long, gentle push versus a short, abrupt, punch. All right. So peaks or spikes of pressure or impulse can exceed shear force, bleed energy, and kill speed. All right, so these are ways in which you avoid this. To avoid breaking ice bonds, pressure and impulse must be minimized. Several ways of doing this. One is maximize the distribution of force application along the entire area of the ski. So this is pressure. You want lower pressure everywhere. If you spread it out evenly along the whole length of the ski, not just in the tip, not just in the tail, right, but evenly spread out, you minimize the pressure, right, and you decrease the risk of exceeding shear force. Maximize the distribution of force along both skis, so don't load it up on one ski or the other. Spread it evenly as much as possible along both skis, right? So you utilize the maximum surface area to decrease the pressure, all right? Maximize the distribution of force application along the entire length of the course and time, right? So that means being constantly in a turn, constantly applying pressure. You'll apply even pressure, steady pressure, but it's going to be less than if you run straight, then make an abrupt turn, and you're just jamming on the pressure, breaking snow bonds, throwing snow. And the last principle is I call ski like water. The reason why I say that is people used to say, "Hey, you ski like water." Well, the idea is you keep your body so soft, especially in Super G and downhill, right? And this means that your body is loose to absorb bumps and any other abrupt change in course terrain, all right? So you don't get these impulse jolts, right? You just absorb everything. You keep your body soft. If you have a bump, as you go over it, you pull your legs up and you absorb that. All right. And usually, if you see a bump, you come to a bump, right? You get your body a little bit high before you hit that bump, and then let's see. Maybe I'll draw a bump here. All right. So here's an example. Let's say you're skiing along here. As you're coming up to this bump, what you do is you raise your upper body a little bit, And when you go over this, you pull your legs up. So you just absorb that, and you don't apply any different increase in pressure over that because you're pulling up your legs. All right. And you can pull up your legs because you raised your upper body a little bit before going to that bump. All right. And then you don't, you're not applying any impulse force upon that bump. All right. Hopefully that makes sense. So more will be said about these four methods of maximizing the distribution of force application when we analyze fundamental techniques later on in this lesson. All right, so the first thing is to maximize the distribution of force application along the entire length of the ski. So this is the ski, right? You want even force applied all along. What that does is that maximizes the use of the entire surface area. If you have increased surface area, you're going to have decreased pressure at any point along this. Now, if you really lean back, right, and you concentrate the force on the tails, just let's say this section right here, right? You see, that's a small surface area. That's going to cause high pressure, which is going to run the risk of breaking ice bonds and then throwing snow and bleeding energy. All right. All right, simply put, this means evenly applying pressure along the entire length of the ski in order to avoid concentrations that exceed threshold shear force. One example is Bode Miller. I'll use him because he was kind of notorious for sitting back too far. All right, and this would concentrate pressure on his tails. You have higher pressure, and he'd break a lot of ice bonds and throw a large rooster tail snow bleeding energy. Almost looks like a water skier. You ever see a water skier, you know, on one ski and they throw a lot of water? All right, so I'll show you a video that shows this.
Over his skis, it looked like there was a zero communication going on.
See him sit back
There
there?
was no communication from the head to the skis on Sunday, but today we heard, we talked to that up. This equipment was
All right,
good,
look
but
at all
he
the
was
snow
not
he's throwing.
happy with the way he skied the
And it's
flat
concentrated on the tails.
coming off the.
Right there, he's way too far back. He's doing a couple things wrong here. One, he doesn't have enough counter rotation. Two, his outside arm is way too high. That's killing his shoulder level, right? Which is killing hip angulation. We'll talk about that later.
Flats there. He was a little bit slowing him to go out in the first four gates.
All right,
He
look at all
proved me
that
wrong.
snow.
He was a gutsy performance. He's in there for the second
Coming off
run.
his tails.
But barely. And it is not just the equipment.
See him sit back too far? Right there, he's sitting back too far.
Bode Miller is on course here and just trying to make something happen. He's
Right there, both arms back. Right, sitting back too far. There's his feet. Most of his mass is in the back.
was in the fog literally in the downhill yesterday and didn't really have a chance to compete there. A race in which he should have done well. He can turn the skis so well on this difficult turny course. Let's see what he does on the shorter version in this Super Combined.
Too far back there.
When you can't
Again, that arm is outside arm is up and high.
see where the start of a turn is, and you're
8th at the finish in the downhill. He was 12th in the Super
Sitting a
G.
little bit back.
You know, expected to do a lot better than
That's
here
back,
at these
too far
World
back.
Championships.
Again, too far
This
back.
man has done what no other
Too far
ski
back.
racer has done in the history of the World Cup. You realize that from 2003, as the season after the Olympics in Salt Lake City, until right before Torino.
Whoa,
in
he nearly
2000
lost it there.
Have to say, with this difficult section here down around Coach's corner in this right hand.
Yeah, again, too far back. Both arms back. Oh, what the hell?
Oh, he's out.
Unbelievable.
Loses a ski.
Oh, man.
And
Okay.
that's what I would have thought, Bode.
All right. The principle of maximizing the distribution of pressure along the entire ski is a general rule that doesn't always apply. For example, especially in slalom and GS, the more technical events, there is a technique for retaining energy within the ski during a turn, which I call energy store, roll, and release. Now, this technique, the main purpose of this technique is to maximize the retention of kinetic energy in your body, avoid dissipating it through, breaking bonds and skidding turns, all right? And what it does, it involves applying greater forward pressure going into the turn to scoop energy into the ski with a flex tip, then rolling that energy progressively from the tips back to the tails. And then as you exit the turn, the energy in the tails shoots you out almost like a springboard effect, propelling the skier in the direction of the next turn, assuming if you have counter rotation. I'll explain that in a second. Thereby, during a turn, kinetic energy is decreased by storing as potential energy in the flex ski. Now, with decreased kinetic energy, as you make that turn, the lower speed of the turn reduces the risk of breaking ice bonds, reduces skidding, all right? So you reduced your kinetic energy because you now have it stored in the flex ski, right? The reduced speed lets you reduce skidding and shear force, and thus you have less energy loss. Instead of bleeding energy, energy is stored and then re-released as kinetic energy when exiting a turn with the skier's legs being shot out like a diver on a springboard. So let me show you this. So as you go into the turn, you want to first flex the tips, all right? You want to engage the tips. So what you're doing is you're not applying even pressure throughout the ski. You're applying more pressure in the tips, right, going into the turn, and to do so, you have shin pressure right there. You're applying shin pressure there, more pressure there. That applies more pressure in the tips, right? You flex that, bend that tip, right? Storing energy like a spring, right? And then as you ski through the turn, you progressively shift your weight backwards, right? Now, I'll teach you how this is done. It's not done with big movements, but mostly with hand movements and arm movements, which roll the shoulder forward, roll the shoulder back, right? It's more controlled than using your whole upper body. All right, but anyways, so what happens is the flex is in the tips, right? As you ski through it, like here, the flex is more even and you have a curved arc. Your ski is curved in an arc. And then as you come out on your tails, right, you're tossed like a springboard. The flex in the tails will shoot you forward. All right. Now, a key difference is you have to have what's called hip rotation or counter rotation. Hip rotation and counter rotation are synonymous, right? Now, with hip rotation, the skier's legs will be thrown laterally to the side across the hill. And this facilitates or helps turn transition, right? It sets you up for the next turn. So your legs will be thrown across, setting you up for the next turn. And this is good. Now, without hip rotation, your chest is going to be facing directly towards the tips of your skis. And when you get that rebound, your legs can be thrown forward. It's going to flip you upwards like a backflip and onto your back, right? And yeah, I've seen guys literally thrown on the back. A number of skiers, Bodie Miller once ran a slalom course, and in the very first turn, he didn't get enough hip rotation, and when he got the rebound spring out of the tails, it threw his legs directly forward and flipped him up and onto his back. All right, so the next thing is you want to maximize. So that's maximizing the distribution of force application along the entire length of the ski. And like I said, that doesn't always apply because there's other techniques, especially in slalom and giant slalom. But in Super G and downhill, the speed events, the premium is on maximizing the distribution along the entire length of the ski. This method doesn't really benefit Super G and downhill because the speeds are so high that the skis chatter and flop around so much that you can't maintain that constant flex in the ski. All right, it's better just to try to maintain even pressure throughout the ski at the high speeds. All right, Now the second method is maximizing the distribution of force application along both skis. Right. The key to this is getting those skis closer together, side by side. Right. When the skis are far apart, there's a greater risk of loading too much pressure on one ski or the other. Right? Usually it's the inside ski you're overloading, and there's a lot of problems with that. There are two key techniques involved in getting the skis closer together, side by side, and they work hand in hand. One is hip rotation combined with slip and slide. And slip and slide is slipping the inside ski forward and the outside ski backwards. So to explain this, let's say you're making a left turn here. To do this, you slip your inside ski, which is your left ski in the left turn, forward, and you slide your outside ski back. Okay, that's slip and slide. Now that facilitates. Slip and slide facilitates hip rotation, and hip rotation facilitates slip and slide. All right. Well, let me read this first. So with hip rotation, the upper body is twisted at the hip to face towards the outside of the turn. This means that if you're making a right turn, you want your upper body turn facing the 10 o'clock position. So if you're making a right turn and your skis are going in this direction, where your upper body, you come around this way, right? Your upper body's facing towards the outside over here, right? Away from the turn. Now that was not the conventional thinking. The conventional thinking prior to this, was always your body's facing in line with your skis, right? That's what people were doing. Recently, as like 2000, I was teaching this in 2010, and people were still doing it by 2011 and 12, and a lot of people were moving away from it, but the best skiers were moving away from it. All right. Okay, so now if you're making a left turn, your skis going this way, your body's facing the tool clock. So it's always facing outside of the turn, right? Not in line with your skis. All right, so to show this, if you're making a left turn, your slip and slide slips your left foot forward, your right foot back, you're going this way, but your upper body's facing this way, away from the turn. Now, if you're making a right turn, your right foot is slipped forward, your left foot is slipped back, right? You're going this way, but your upper body's facing away from the turn, right? Totally against common sense, totally against conventional thinking, but the benefit is when you do slip and slide with hip rotation, you end up pulling your skis closer side by side. Now, see how close they are here? If you try to ski the 2-foot method, all right, with your upper body facing towards the front of your skis, so your upper body's facing this way, as you go around a turn, your feet are going to have to be far apart, right? Think about it. If you're laying out on on a side, in this case on your left side, to make a left turn, all right. And you have your feet side by side. Well, this foot's not contacting the snow. Foot's going to be up in the air, right? If they're side by side. And think of this as being like a board, like a 2x4 board, right? Locked between your feet, and you go around a turn like that. All right, now slip and slide will draw the skis closer side by side. With the skis closer, force application can be distributed more evenly on both skis. Also, you reduce the risk of two fundamental errors, one of which is inside ski blowout. That's when you load up too much force on the inside ski, and when that ski tip grips, it pulls you around hard. It'll torque you around, twist you around. It'll jam that left knee up into your chin, and you go flipping and flying out, twisting around. I'll show you some examples of this, some video. Or what can happen is you can have roll down and slide out, where you're loading up too much pressure in the ski, and if you don't have enough hip angulation, where you're gonna load up the inside edge of the inside ski, and you're just gonna slide out and wipe out. All right, so those are two fundamental errors. There's something else I want to say. Also, you reduce the risk of two fundamental errors. Distribution more evenly in both skis. With okay, I can't remember what I wanted to say. All right. So now the next method of maximizing the distribution of force application is to distributed evenly along the entire length of the course. I'll just show you a picture here. So this is a course or part of a course with some gates, right? You want to evenly apply pressure all throughout this course. Now, the old-fashioned method was, well, you want to run as short a line as possible. Shortest line between 2 points is a straight line. Also, you can run your skis flat for as long as possible, right? And they'll believed to have less friction. Then you make that forces you to make these hard turns, at the gates, right? And that was the conventional thinking. That's what everyone was, basically doing. And I said, no, you do the opposite. You stay in a constant turn. All right. So let's take a look at this. Let's examine this. Now, maximizing the distribution of force application in space and time means constantly being in turn in order to spread the turn evenly throughout the entire distance from gate to gate. Now, there are 9 considerations to examine here. Well, the first is obvious, right? Spreading out the turn avoids concentrations of force that will exceed shear of ice bonds, and you throw snow and bleed energy, right? So you stay below that. Now, another consideration is type of course. I believe this principle applies in all 4 disciplines: slalom, giant slalom, super G, and downhill. But I also believe the advantage is much greater in the speed events for doing this: super G and downhill. And the reason is, one, you get higher speeds. With these higher speeds, you have greater chance of increased forces, which can exceed shear force. And also in the speed events, you have increased turn to transition ratio. So with, basically the idea is you can be in a turn for a lot longer than have a quick rapid transition. Whereas in slalom or giant slalom, you're in transition as much of the time as you're in a turn. All right. So what this means is, in super G and downhill, you have more time to forward in spreading out that turn. All right. Hopefully that makes sense. All right. Now, another is distance. The conventional wisdom was the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line, so run a straight line as much as possible from gate to gate. I mean, this is true, but there's a trade-off. Skiing straight lines necessitates abrupt, hard turns at the gate, which will greatly exceed shear force and bleed energy, right? You break ice bonds, you're gonna have skidding friction, you'd be throwing a lot of snow. When you see that snow being thrown, that's just energy being wasted. It takes too much time to rebuild the speed after such a turn, right? Which means that, you're running slow for a long time, right? And then your average speed is going to be slow. The greater advantage, thus, is to maintain speed, even if it requires traveling a little greater distance, the greater distance of broad sweeping turns. You still have the overall advantage in terms of time. All right. Now, the common notion that constantly being on edge means greater friction, right? The constantly being in turns means greater friction. This is, I think, a misconception. I believe this is a total misconception. When a ski is running flat, there is no skidding friction, okay? Granted, you're not skidding, right? But there still is sliding friction between the ski bottom and the snow. Now, when you are in a continuous carving turn where you're not skidding, right, and you're staying below the threshold for shear force, there's also no skidding friction. Like, there's no skidding friction here. You're gripping, right? You're not skidding. And although there may be while the sliding friction may be slightly higher in a turn because you're applying more pressure, there's more pressure, maybe a little bit more sliding friction, it is not significant, right? However, by maximizing the distribution of force application along the entire course, when in a constant turn, you minimize the risk in tight turns of exceeding shear force. I mean, it's not a risk, it's going to happen. If you concentrate that turn in too short space and time, you're going to exceed shear force, break ice bonds, throw snow, right? Have skidding, scraping, friction, and all that's going to bleed much more energy. So running straight lines requires hard concentrated turns that exceed shear force, breaking bonds, throwing snow, bleeding energy, and scrubbing speed. Hard concentrated turns will also require skidding, which greatly increase friction. All right. So another consideration are tactical considerations. The word tactical is kind of like a generic kind of, vague term, but what they're talking about is like, some of these considerations are course terrain. Courses are not going to be like straight, steady. They're going to go up and down, flatter, right? Going around bends and so forth, right? So you have all these terrain considerations to deal with, and then you got to deal with, well, where do they put gates within that terrain, right? So that complicates it, right? And then you have snow conditions. What is the snow like? What's the snow like? Not just in general, but different parts of the course. The snow is different. You get to the outside of the course, you get soft, fluffy snow, and that can really kill you, right? It can kill grip. It can also, increase friction. If you have soft, fluffy snow, you got to go through. Now, these conditions will affect your line selection, your point of turn initiation when you really, start that turn. When you make the transition, point of turn initiation and transition. All right, and body position. Let's say you're going off a fall away or drop off ramp. You have to be leaning over that to get to engage the outside ski. Among other things, I say inter alia means among other things. But the general principle, no matter what these tactical considerations are, right? The general principle of maximizing the distribution of force application always applies. You always have to keep this in mind. All right. Now, I believe when you're in a constant, moderate turn, you're going to get less leg fatigue than if you're in a tuck, right? Holding a tuck, and then when you get to a turn, making a hard, abrupt turn. So I believe one reason being in a continuous moderate turn is less fatiguing on the legs has to do with the difference between aerobic and anaerobic metabolism. Aerobic meaning you have plenty of oxygen available. Anaerobic meaning you don't have enough oxygen. You go into oxygen deficit with bursts of muscle strain, right? So intense bursts of force needed for the abrupt sharp turns requires anaerobic metabolism, while the lesser force of a continuous turn can utilize aerobic metabolism. All right. Now, anaerobic metabolism is far less efficient at producing ATP than aerobic. So anaerobic metabolism produces 2 ATP per glucose molecule versus aerobic produces 38 ATP per glucose molecule. I mean, that's a difference of 19 times. This is 19 times more efficient, right? Also, anaerobic metabolism produces lactic acid as a byproduct, which you have to then pump through your liver. What is that cycle called? Cori cycle? Yeah, I think Cori cycle, where you get rid of that lactic acid, which which causes muscle fatigue and pain. So lactic acid causes muscle fatigue and pain, and I don't know the exact physiological mechanism, but it's probably due to the fact that our body can tolerate small variations in pH, right? It's got to be pretty much locked at 7.4 pH. Otherwise, what happens is that disrupts protein conformation. So proteins are very complex molecules with very specific structures, right? Now, if you go out of pH range and it doesn't take much, right? You start screwing up the shape of those molecules and they don't work anymore. Now that can be muscle fibers, muscle tissue, or it can be enzymes, or it can be like cell signaling molecules on the surface of cells, right? In either case, they're not working anymore, right? And so you're not metabolizing properly. All right, where were you? Okay. So you disrupt protein conformation in both muscle tissue for contraction and enzymes for metabolism. Any sort of proteins. There's all sorts of proteins you need. I also think it is possible that having legs laid out to the side in a turn may be less straining on muscle, even if more force is applied in turn than constantly bent legs while holding a tuck. You know, just holding your own weight in a tuck is very tiring and straining, right? That takes a lot of conditioning in itself, right? Standing up is much easier, right? Because you hold the force more naturally, better. But with standing up, you're using your leg bones lined up, right? When you're in a tuck, it's all muscle, right? It's not bone upon bone, like lined up in a line, right? Now you gotta hold that with a lot of muscle strength. So it's like the difference between standing and holding a continuous squat, right? So imagine yourself having to squat for like hours. I mean, you're just like straining like crazy. So caveat: this is a hypothesis. I expect people to make up all sorts of attacks. No, here because again, this is I haven't done like scientific experiments with ATP here. Rapid transitions. Okay, so the key to maximizing the distribution of force application along the entire length of course are quick and clean transitions and picking the right line. This is facilitated by lifting the legs as they transition over the hump, all right, and then laying them out to the other side. Rapidly applying force right away, engaging those skis right away, and then you start applying force right away without having to wait for the upper body to fall. I'll explain this later when I teach specific techniques, but I'll just show you right now. So here are different turns. This is a transition. So you're making, let's say, a right turn here, right? If you're making a right turn, your legs are laid out to the left side, and then when you transition to a left turn, you gotta pull your legs up under your body and shoot them out to the other side, right? The right side for left turn, right? During this time, you're not applying force. Boom, you're engaging force right away. So there's only a short time when you're not applying force. Hopefully you see that. Now here's a worse turn. Let's say you get too much air and you're floating in the air and you got to wait until you come down and apply force. Well, this is a poor transition because you're not maximizing the application of force, right? And usually what happens if you get air time, when you hit this, actually that causes an impulse. When you come down, boom, you get a spike of force there. So this is kind of erroneous. It should be like a spike of force, and then you break ice bonds, you skid a little bit, okay, right? So the idea is you want seamless transitions, like rapid, right, where you apply force right away, right? Don't like float in the air, and then when you come down, bam, right, and then you're applying force. All right. Hopefully that makes sense. Speed, continuous turns, travel greater distances, but this is more than offset by the greater average speed of the end, right? So even though when you're making these broad sweeping turns, you're traveling a greater distance, and people, the common sense, the conventional, thinking was, oh, that's just dumb. You're going further, right? Right? Take the shortest line possible. Well, no, that actually kills your speed. Now here's a consideration: tightness of the line. So even if you're in a continuous turn, you can ski a tighter line. That's possible, right? But you have to be careful not to exceed the threshold of shear force where you start breaking ice bonds and throwing snow, right? So this is something that's you can cheat on the line, get a shorter distance, but make sure you're always in a constant turn, right? And try to spread out continuous application of force. And in any case, you want to apply force so that it remains below the threshold of shear force. All right, summary. Average speeds is more important than distance. Old school technique, the conventional thinking, conventional wisdom breaks far more ice bonds, when doing that. Scrubbing speed. Constant turn is still sliding friction and avoids skidding friction and hard turn. So, when you're in a constant turn, that's still sliding friction. You're not doing skidding friction, That's a misconception. People think you're skidding, right? No, you're still doing sliding friction when you're carving. All right, sliding friction being less, that's the classic idea behind, like cars skidding, the wheel skidding. As soon as the wheel starts to skid, it loses friction, it loses grip, because sliding friction is a lot less than that gripping friction when the tire is rolling. So then, as soon as that tire starts to skid, you start losing control. All right. So yeah, again, the conventional thinking is, well, you run a straight line from gate to gate, right? You minimize the friction you believe, and also you shortest distance, right? Then you make a turn, hard turn, and you do the same thing here, run a straight line. I say, no, you don't try to run straight and flat as possible. You stay in a constant turn. Here's a transition, boom. For right turn, the legs go up to this side, right? And then you're going to make a left turn, so legs go up to this side, right to the right side, so forth, right? All right, okay. Recall that this is running straight. You're not applying much force, right? Then when you get to the turn, you got to slam that force. And then at this point, you're exceeding shear force. You're breaking ice bonds, throwing a lot of snow, right? And you end up killing your speed. Now you're going slow, and it takes you a while. Sure, you're accelerating, going faster and faster, right? But you're playing catch up here, right? You're going slow for a while. Now this way, you maintain your speed, right? You try to maintain a constant turn, so you're constantly applying force, right? But you maintain it below the threshold of shear force, right? So if you see a person using proper technique in Super G or downhill, you won't see much snow being thrown at all, right? Especially if they're doing a lot of slip and slide, counter rotation, where the skis are close together, they can go through a turn and it looks like they're just knifing without throwing any snow, all right? They're knifing through that turn. That's the idea. Run straight for as long as possible. This is conventional thinking, because straight line is the shortest. Run straight for as long as possible because you'll run the skis flat, which has the least friction. I agree, it's probably a little bit less, but it's only a slight difference between the sliding friction here and sliding friction in a carved turn, right? You're not getting the skidding friction. My analysis: maximize the distribution of force application to avoid spikes of impulse and pressure that exceeds the shear force for ice bond breaking, right? Running straight as long as possible necessitates sharp, hard turns, which exceed the threshold of shear force, generating waste energies and cutting speed. You also have a lot more skidding friction, generating more heat, because it will take too much time to rebuild speed. It is faster to maintain speed, even though you travel a greater distance over ground, right? Now here's a caveat. It could be, I expect people to be motivated to lie. Oh, we never said this, right? Yeah, this was exactly the dominant thinking, really, I mean, to be honest, prior to what I taught, which is counterintuitive. Constantly being in turbo, like, what? That's slow. No, it's actually faster. And everyone's doing it now. Now, last thing is skiing like water. This means keeping your body soft to absorb all terrain. All right, I'll draw some terrain here. Okay. All right, so you want to absorb all these bumps. So this is a pretty significant bump here, and the idea is, as you're coming along here, right, you want to raise your upper body a little bit, and then as you come across this, you pull up your legs. So you barely just brush across this, right? You're not hitting this hard. You're not applying impact or impulse. Boom, right? You're just barely touching this, and then you extend your legs down, get low again, and then what you want to do is get your upper body really low. When you have a fall away, get your upper body really low, and then you extend your legs as you come down to apply pressure right away, right? So you're gripping right away. Let's say there's a turn here, a gate right here, right? Well, you gotta get your body way low, upper body way low, and then as soon as you come across this, shoot your legs down so you're applying pressure right away, and then you got to get your upper body over, leaning over this if you're coming across here. Otherwise, you're going to end up on the inside edge of your inside ski, and you're going to slide out, right? All right, that's the idea. Some examples. Okay. All right, I think that's it. The next lesson we're going to talk about is vector analysis of force, acceleration, and inertia. This is going to be a little bit more complicated, right?